how we could survive it.
The RAF's opening attack of the Falklands War, designed to strike terror into the hearts of the Argentinians. It was a secret, but very British mission.
Monty Python couldn't have done it any better.
The crew has never seen action before.
Gulp. Yes, it's us now.
I must admit, I didn't like the idea of doing it.
And all they have is an aging British bomber.
It had a computer. This was driven by wheels, pulleys, bits of bicycle chain.
To prepare, they learned techniques not used since World War II.
And a lot of the work was done on a £5 pocket calculator bought in Swaffham Market.
But it all seemed to be going so well. What can possibly go wrong? And then it did.
It will be the longest bombing raid in history, if they succeed.
BBC News at 6 o'clock. The Falkland Islands, the British colony in the South Atlantic, has fallen. That's what Argentina said. It claims it's...
With the news that Argentina had seized the Falkland Islands, Britain's military bases were put on high alert.
At precisely 10:15 this morning, HMS Invincible, flagship of this extraordinary fleet, slipped her moorings...
At RAF Waddington, they watched Britain's mighty task force set sail to recapture the islands.
The operation and Britain's commitment to this task force had begun.
But they didn't think they'd be seeing any action.
Our initial thought was, oh, dearie me, but can't see us being involved.
Like most people, I heard about the invasion of the Falklands on the television or probably through radio news. I had not the faintest thought that we would be involved.
Waddington had once been the home of Britain's nuclear V-force. But the nuclear deterrent had been handed over to the Navy, and now the V-force was facing extinction, not war. Its once shining fleet of nuclear Vulcan bombers was just 3 months away from being broken up by bulldozers.
I think there was a feeling in the 80s it was the end of an era. The Vulcans were closing down, they'd never been greatly improved, and they weren't going to be improved now.
But all that was about to change.
Prime Minister!
It is a government's objective to see that the islands are freed from occupation and are returned to British administration at the earliest possible moment.
As Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher stirred the nation into a patriotic frenzy, behind the scenes, head of the RAF, Sir Michael Beetham, went to see her with a cunning plan.
She was very enthusiastic. And I said, well, we've got some more work to do, but hopefully we can do it.
Beetham's plan was breathtakingly bold. To send a lone Vulcan bomber 8,000 miles down to the Falklands to blow up the runway at Port Stanley. At one stroke, it would stop the Argentinians using the runway as a base to attack the task force, and it would put the fear of God into the Argentinian people that the Vulcan might be back to bomb them. But there was a hitch. The Vulcan itself. Back in the coldest days of the Cold War, the Vulcan was state-of-the-art. It could be in the air within 2 minutes, delivering nuclear bombs into the heartlands of the Soviet Union. But devised in the late 1940s by the designer of the Lancaster, the sinister tin triangle was now showing its age.
Well, it was a very nice aircraft, High-tech, I'm not quite so sure. High-tech maybe when it came into service. I mean, I can certainly remember showing ex-Bomber Command people over the Vulcan in the 80s, and they'd say, oh, look at that, Fred, we had that over Berlin in 1944.
The technology in the Vulcan was very old. They said they had a bombing computer. This was driven by wheels, pulleys, bits of bicycle chain, etc. There was nothing electronic in it.
On Good Friday, RAF Waddington was told to prepare for war.
At squadron level, people were starting to think, yes, there just might be the final hurrah coming up here.
Suddenly, we were making this change from a peacekeeping role, albeit a rather strange one involving nuclear weapons, but a peacekeeping role, to one that would be a warfighting role.
It was vital they destroyed the runway before the task force reached the Falklands. That left them just 3 weeks to get ready. But the challenges that lay ahead to get the old Vulcans fit for action looked insurmountable.
There seemed to be so much that the Vulcan lacked and the crews lacked when we were told that we were going to be flying for thousands and thousands of miles over the sea. The Vulcan was never really designed with that sort of mission in mind.
The biggest hurdle was the sheer distance to the Falklands and back, 16,000 miles. They could use the British island of Ascension as a midway base, but that still left a round trip of 8,000 miles to the Falklands, double the Vulcan's maximum range. The only solution was to refuel the aircraft in the air. But no one had attempted this in a Vulcan for 20 years. And its refueling system no longer worked. Engineers raced to unblock the pipes and refit probes. They tore through rusty junkyards and scrapped aircraft, looking anywhere to find vital parts.
Unless we could find them, the sortie was going to be a non-starter. We couldn't get there.
One crucial item was found in the crew room, being used as an ashtray.
Need that part.
While the engineers patched the aircraft together, the crews assembled to discuss mid-air refueling.
Somebody wisely said, have you ever done it before then? Uncle Neil, who was a little bit older than the rest of us, said, well, I had a go and it was bloody awful, I tell you. It was the most dangerous thing I've ever done. We said, oh yes, Neil, tell us more.
But he said it was so dangerous, that's the reason the Vulcans stopped doing it. Which, yeah, it was a great start, really.
Carrying out this dangerous maneuver meant flying within feet of the refueling tanker. To take fuel, the pilot then had to try to stick the Vulcan's probe into a metal basket trailing behind.
There's all sorts of expressions to talk about air-to-air refueling. Two insects mating in flight is one of them. It is, of course, arranging mid-air collisions between aircraft.
3 of the top Vulcan crews were selected for training. But only 1 would fly the mission. The RAF did not have enough resources to refuel more than 1 Vulcan all the way to the Falklands. The chosen pilots were Squadron Leader Alistair Monty Montgomery, a charismatic and tough Scotsman.
There was a rumour mill, mainly started by fighter pilots, that only fighter pilots could do this stuff of refueling in the air. So we thought, hey, this is our chance, and we were desperate to have a go at it, believe me.
Squadron Leader John Reeve, also eager to have a crack at the runway.
And I personally had absolutely no moral qualms whatsoever about doing this. And in terms of, introspection, are we going to get away with this? Well, compared to having a go at Leningrad, Port Stanley every time for me, please, if you don't mind.
And lastly, the most junior of the bunch, Flight Lieutenant Martin Withers.
I really genuinely thought that I was going to get through my whole time in the RAF without getting involved in any form of conflict, without actually dropping a bomb on anybody in anger. And I must admit, I didn't like the idea of doing it.
But do it they must. And learning to refuel was just the first of many techniques they were going to have to master before they set off for war.
Closing up behind a big tanker is really quite straightforward, but to actually get the probe into the basket was another matter.
I spent the next 15 minutes missing to the left, missing to the right, missing below.
2, 1, in, no, he's out.
The crews soon find ways of describing the experience.
Stabbing a wet donut, shoving very warm spaghetti up a cat's backside.
2, 1, come back right, pushing.
Endless fun, frustrating until you get the hang of it.
Green on.
In peacetime, this would have taken months and months of intensive training. They only have 2 weeks. And if they fail, the task force would be at the mercy of Argentinian jets. With the Royal Navy